RE 2001. I was responsible for submission of RE 2008 and read 2014 for Brunel. So really, that's maybe my background. And now I go around and count students as well to see if we can still have them. So what I would like to talk about today, and this is a topic that's coming up more and more, and I think it's important for us to understand how all of this works. So the idea is that, historically, people did research, they published it, and then they moved on to something else. And so what I'd like to talk about is what next. And more, there's a lot more that goes on after the research is published. And really, it's talking about impact in the wider sense. And it was quite interesting to see your open access week. Of course, all universities having this big drive. We had ours, we had open access mandate, all these things. Because this is becoming really important, but it's more important for the researcher than even for the institution. And I will give you a panoramic view of what I think now maybe a sort of a modern researcher would call it, should really take into consideration. So it's about dissemination, first thing. How do we disseminate? And with all the idea of the impact, social impact case studies in the red. But this is whether you want to have an academic impact, so you do research for your academic community to advance knowledge, to influence other academics in the field, sometimes to just being cited, have a nice citation H index. Or if you're interested in socio-economic impact of your research, which is contribute to public debate, influence policymakers, and you're help understand the sort of the real problem of life. The dissemination of the research is absolutely fundamental. And I'll explain why. If research is not discoverable, there can be no impact, because people are not able to read it. And this is whether there is the academic impact or the socio-academic impact. And the internet, as we're now, it's becoming faster. There are more countries and more places globally that can have access to the internet. It opened this door on the research being discoverable globally. And this is where, whether you're interested more in the academic impact of your research, what you have to think is that I know we always complain that we're not funded very well, that it's difficult, the library budgets are the first ones that go, and having, the journal public, it's difficult and, they're expensive. But if you think about it, at the global level, we are still very, very lucky, because we have all these resources. But there could be a very talented researcher in, a developing country where they don't have any journals. They can't buy any journals. They don't have the funds for it. But the one thing they have is the internet and Google. So the one thing they do, if they're really interested in something, they start Googling. They go on Google Scholar, they see the list of publications, and they're going to read the ones they can read. If they're not open access, if they're not available, and your research is not available, they're not going to read it. And what they read is what they might find interesting and what might cite. So it is not just a question of open access, we're saying it, but globally, there is about probably 90% of the world that doesn't have the access we have, or even more, to the journals and cannot subscribe to them. So open access is absolutely fundamental to make sure that your research is discoverable. But the same is if you would like, if you're interested in having you believe that your research can make a real contribution to the socio-economic impact. So, the public, industry, policymakers, they do not subscribe to journals. They don't know what they are. But as I say, we go back. The one thing they have is Google. So first thing that is really important is to think as open access as the best way to make your research discoverable globally. Of course, we know there's a big, debate. It's not a debate anymore, that's what it is, at the policy level, that HEFKI and BIS and the government and the Treasury and publicly funded research should be accessible by the public. Because in theory, they're already paying for it. So RCUK, Research Council, papers published through RCUK funded projects should be made available in gold open access. Do you know the difference between gold, shall I just say gold and green? Okay. So gold, I'll probably have it underneath, but anyway, gold open access is when the paper is published, it's immediately available to be read. So normally you pay an article level fee to the journal, and and therefore it means that it's open access, so it's full text accessible at the moment they're published. Green open access is if you deposit it in maybe your institutional repository, or there's some huge repository around it. I'll talk a bit about it later. And that means that there's normally an embargo, maybe 3 months, depends on the journal, 6 months. And then you can put the author copy, so not the right place, the author copy, the last author copy, and you can deposit it in open access. So that's the green. Now, and I'll just say this, I know that for some time, open access journals, or there was a perception that these journals were not very high quality. And that thing is now completely, it's not because what the publishers now do is that they publish in both modes the same journal. So in fact, we pay them twice in general, because we subscribe to the journal as a university, but if we want some of those articles or outputs to be available in gold open access, we pay them for that article to go in open access, in gold open access. So that's the difference between the two. So one is gold is that it's immediately available full text through the journal. The green is when you deposit in a repository, your own institutional repository, or whatever repository you have. So RCUK, so all the funding council, this is what happens. In fact, they provide a fund for it. And they check, because we're in fact being audited at the moment, to ensure that all the outputs come out from funded research by the research councils then gets published at gold open access. REF 2020, I'm sure you all know, papers submitted to the REF will be eligible only if they are in open access, either gold or green, so there could be a repository. They have to be deposited within 3 months of acceptance. So they have, after the embargo, you know that the journals have embargo. So in the green is self-archive version of the article for practice public repository. This is how they say it. So so I think it comes into operation at April 2016. If you publish anything that you want to submit to REC 2020, which I think is going to go ahead, if it's published after April 2016, it has to be open access. But you cannot wait until 2019 and make it open access. It has to be put as open access within 3 months of the acceptance of the paper. Otherwise, they throw it out. So there's a huge pressure anyway on open access, but I think it's a good thing anyway. So really what visibility is key, but what I would like to cover are three big domains. One is about open access. Then I would like to introduce the concept of researcher profile that follows on from the open access, so the visibility as a researcher. And then the next one, which is all going to hit us in a few years' time, which is open data, which that's coming along as well. So how do you put your research, make it open access? There are open access journals, institutional repository. We have an institutional repository, many other institutions have. Discipline-specific archives. So the most famous of that was started by Brunel University, typical for the sciences and physics. It's called Archive. It has currently over 1 million e-prints in physics, mathematics, computer science, biology, quantitative finances, and statistics. This is absolutely huge. And in fact, most of the physicists that we have some at Brunel, they don't care that if it goes to a journal, if it's copyright, they all put them there. That's where people go. And they're all open access, so full text. Then there's a very interesting, the other one, which is the Social Science Research Network, more for the social sciences. A lot of the American universities, law schools, have their journals, you know, that they have their own journals, but law schools have them on this network. And this is another very big. So there are many others of this type, but these are the two major ones. Now, once you have an open access, what are the other things that go around can be used? So there are, and these are multiple, and they keep coming out by little mushrooms. Anyway, so they're the virtual research environments. One of these is Magdalene. I don't know if you heard it. It's been acquired by Elsevier, that seems to be buying up everything they can, which is it's a free reference management academic social network. So the moment you are in this open access, discoverable research arena, then you can start collaborating and you can start using these virtual research environments. So Mendeley, typically you collaborate with colleagues and you share papers, notes and annotations, you read and out, discover papers, people are public. So Mendeley, typically you can join a group in an area of your own interest, and you can say, and sometimes they have little libraries where you post papers. And say, I read this thing, it's really interesting. Maybe some else, other of you might be interested in this. And these type of virtual research environments help get through the myriad of information of papers that get published. And then I saw people start collaborating across the world. As I say, research, the one great thing about research is completely global. It doesn't matter what people say. And these virtual research environments really help with these type of things. And again, the research is out there. The other one is slightly like, and I say these are just a couple of examples. The free service for managing and discovering scholarly references. So they have 8 million articles on there, and they add about 1,000 every day. I looked at these references yesterday. So you saw references, discover new article and resource because they have these filters, they have these communities. Then you can have your own automated recommendation, you share references, and everything you want. Find out who's reading and where you're reading, and then there's ResearchGate. And you know, as I say, there are a huge amount. So this is this virtual discoverable environment that is now being created. And when we move on and we talk about, you know, what's the point of what the academic impact, and we start talking about citations, and this is where I'm going to start talking a bit then about, you know, the alternative metrics that therefore these type of new environments are creating. If we go back to the conventional metrics, citations that were created, they're free, big indexing databases, the Web of Knowledge, or, you know, Web of Science, however you want to call it. There's the Thomson Reuters one, which is considered the golden standard, mainly scientific, but it's opening up very much, goes back quite a lot. And it's, I think it covers about 75% of the journals. Scopus, that's the Elsevier one, that's the one that was used in Rec Developer Team to collect citations. It's much broader based, it doesn't go back as much, but has a lot more of the social sciences, so it's much bigger. And they collect their own citations. And then of course there's Google Scholar, which includes, a citation includes grey literature, so it's really interesting. So you might get citation because, you know, a newspaper or some magazine site, and they find that reference. So these are the major indexing databases. But of course, we all know that there's some huge, well, I would say problems, but we have to be very cautious, of course, with citations. And this is why we are having now seeing all these alternative metrics coming up. So these are the biggest problems with citations. There's a large variability between and within disciplines, and of course this is quite easy to understand. If you take a paper, typically biosciences, and you look at the back of the paper, they have 40, 50 citations. So references normally. So they're about, for each paper, there are on average 45 citations going around the system because the references are very long. Mathematics, pure maths, very, very few references. So the paper typically it's not very long, and it might have about 6 or 7 So the number of citations going around on average per paper is a lot less. So, and even within disciplines, if you think of physics, there's a huge variability between, you know, the theoretical physicists and the particle physicists. So citations are really, you know, they're very difficult to compare, even within subjects. Naturally, you know, they don't cover very literature on journal-based publications, and of course, citations are dependent on the university database, because if they cover more journals, well, they don't have more citations going around, they can cover less journals. Other big problems with citations. If you have a paper with, sorry, this I'm starting off with another one of my bugbears about citation. If you have a paper with 900 citations, you might say that that's probably is of interest to people. You know, let's assume that you say, well, that's okay. It doesn't say that it's probably good quality. But if you have a paper with 0 citation, it doesn't mean it's low quality. It doesn't scale. Citations don't scale. So if you, I don't know, if I do some analysis with citations, I always want a large data set. So you're looking at a group, looking at their outputs over 6 years. And then you can give us it. But the moment you break it down and down and down, you come to the individual citation at the level of one paper, they're completely meaningless, if not even misguided. And I know of institutions in the last rep that will include or exclude papers, you know, or include or exclude academics on the basis of the average citations. That is absolute madness. It's a different thing. So from citations, you have, you know, the journal impact factors, which is just the average citation of papers published in the journal. And it's even worse, the citation using that. And in fact, there is a declaration of San Francisco, something like that just come out called DORA, that HEFKI, UCL, they're all, you know, they're pushing people, institutions are never ever to use journal impact factors. There's a lot of gaming, first thing. And in Nature, that has, I think, an impact factor of 30, 32, so that should be the average citations per paper. About 80%, 90% of papers are never cited. They're published in Nature. So, you know, that's just a bad idea. And then the H index, which is, I don't know, who else come across the H index? Oh, yeah, which is fascinating. Yeah, it's a number of papers with X or more citations. And this is an individual measure. So I have an H index of 3 if I have 3 papers with at least 3 or more citations. I could have published 100 papers, but my H index would be 3 if I have 3. I will have an H index of 10 if I have 10 papers with 10 or more citations. So of course it's exponential, it becomes more and more difficult. And in America, I know that there's some universities that would not even shortlist for interview candidates that don't have a particular H index in that discipline. So, you see, you make a measure and everybody starts using it, abusing it. And then we come to the fun bit. And these are rising and rising. And I don't know if anybody came across, after Rep 2014, there was a big study commissioned by HEFKI on the use of metrics, or the non-use of metrics. And it came out with this very, very good report called The Metrics Time. You find it on the HEFKI web pages. And when they start looking, because they have all the data of all of the outputs and how they were scored, they start correlating, they try to correlate the scores given by the peer review panels with the citation and other measures, and they found that there was no correlation with citations. But strange enough, in some of the social science, there was more correlation with some of these metrics. I'm not saying we're good on, but so the whole thing is opening up. So alternative metrics, they call it alternative, or other people call it article level metrics. So these use article usage, and we go back to the idea of discoverable research and open access. Views and downloads, if they're being cited, you know, or referenced to on social networks, site you like, Meta, Facebook, and then it goes on and on and on. If they're in blogs, use anything that's traceable. And how they do it, once you have your paper out there and has a DOI, that's what they use. They trace the DOI, they link the DOI. So I might have all these, I'm not a computer science, but I have all these little robots going around searching things. And so typically, if you look at this paper, so it's a bit small. This is from the SSRN repository. Market risk being used in 82 countries, a survey of whatever. So this is from a business school. I pick this. So if you look at this paper, that's over there. And if you look up there, it says that's one citation. Okay, maybe academically, it wasn't very interesting. But the abstract has been viewed 53,000 times, and the paper has been downloaded 23,000 times. So these type of other type of metrics, what to call them, alt metrics, start telling you something. It doesn't mean that it tells you that it's going to have impact, that you can use it for a case study. It doesn't tell you that it's the highest quality ever. But it does give you an indication that people are interested in this. People read it. They download it. Maybe it's made to the public. Maybe there are, other, public bodies. And this is true as well as this is one of the most famous open access journal, which is +1. And here again, citations 5, views 214,000. Now, people might have just got there by mistake and then said, God, this is boring. I'm not going to do anything with it. But, this is an indication of what is happening around that. So really, if we look at this graph, it comes from SSRN, so I haven't referenced it. And these are article usage and citations. So these are the citations, and that's the views or the usage. And in general, okay, there is quite a weak correlation, but you expected it probably with the very good article, people are probably reading it and things like that. But what's interesting in these type of things is that little point up there. Now that, as I say, maybe academically it wasn't groundbreaking, but a lot of people were interested in that little spot. So we have to start looking at research and this idea of what happens after that in a much broader sense, much broader view. And there are a lot of tools out there for free, or you can, I'm going to show you that, if you buy a subscription, you get a devices there, that help you with these things. So this is one of my favorite ones. It's called Altmetric. In fact, Brunel, we subscribe to it. And this is the page you go on. So what you do, and this is the page. You go there, they say, grab it. And you grab this little thing here, and you move it to your bar on the internet. Bar. So it's a little, what do you call it? Whatever. Bookmark it. And what does this do? When you're on paper, like this one, normal paper, so if you click on the little blue bit somewhere, probably up there, oh yeah, there it is. You click on that little thing up there. If this has a DOI, it's recognized, it comes up with this little thing, the donut. I wouldn't get too worried about the number in it. But this says that this particular paper was picked up in 5 news outlets, newspapers around the world, being blogged by 8 people, tweeted by 720. So 50 Facebook pages, mention one word again and again. And if you click on more details, this is what comes up with. This is a map of the world, and this is a map of tweets. So it tells you by country, what we're interested in. And don't ask me how they do it. And then there's the Twitter demographics. So, first time, members of the public, 92%. scientists, whatever the other, practitioners, science communication. Now, we know about tweets, people retweet and things like that. But you can go and look at every single one of those tweets. Just click that, and it gives you the whole list. Now, I think the free one, because you can just go now back to the office and do it, I think has a limit. But if you buy a license, so we bought the license at Brunel, and this is how it looked. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I'll take it back out. Oh, sorry. Oh, no, here it is. Sorry. I must have confused. And this is how it looks if you do it at an institutional level. So this is Brunel. I did this some time ago. And these are all the papers from Brunel. And we gave them the structure. So they can divide by departments, areas. And of course, it shows all the activity, all mentions. But of course, what we are interested in, and I'm sure everybody would be interested in, is this one, policy documents. So what it does, what they do, to go around and find if there's any reference to our papers, the papers that have in the data set, that keeps refreshing. We have a link with our publication database. And documents typically are nice guidance. All of these policies that, of course, they're always put out there. And so, we can go and have a look and say, hey, do you know that your paper? And those then can become things that you can start thinking about impact case studies. As I say, it doesn't tell you that this has an impact, but they're all things that you can follow. But talking to some colleagues that use social media quite a lot with their publication, and they use, sort of things like on metric to see the tweets, they have found that sometimes they found, I cannot remember exactly all the details, but they found that there was a community of some type of, that was interested, that there was sort of a, might have been something around some health problem in Australia that found their paper and their research very interesting. And of course, what then she did, she contacted them and started a conversation. And so she did ask them, said, well, you're ready, you kind of told you, why didn't you contact me? They said, oh, but well, no, you're an academic. We wouldn't have contacted you. There's a barrier for the public to contact. So I say these are not things that you can, I can then just as director of planning put all these numbers in and say, oh yes, we're up or down or anything like that. But I think it's interesting both for the institution but for the individual researcher, because they can find something about the research that is very difficult to know, because once it's out there, it's difficult to know. So our metric typically use policy document, face, blogs, Twitter, Weibo, Reddit, peer reviews, research analysis, that's a year, Q&A section, Pinterest. I mean, some of these I'm not very good with social media, so no. And that's our metric, but total impact, plum analytics, pure, they're all metrics. There's really tons of this stuff. So it gives you a completely different view of what happens next. And in fact, what I would like to move on is the importance, once you are on this sort of journey, of your researcher profile. So we've looked at the single outputs, that's fine. But then what we can do is to bring all your discoverable research in your own profile. And this is your profile. So the researcher unique identifier. So each database, they have their own. And, interesting enough, they present different things. So this is, well, knowledge, well, science, if you have unique identifier, if you have your research, first thing you link or you associate with the publications that are yours with your profile. It's completely free. I mean, you don't have to have a license or anything. But then, for example, you can see your collaboration networks, or you can see where in the world people have cited your paper from, because they create automatically these networks. Or the research areas. Maybe you work in a particular area, but you start finding that there are a different discipline, there are people in a different discipline that cite your work. So, and this is, you manage your own profile. And it makes it a lot easier for people who want to find your work. I'll go on to that in a minute. Scopus has it, well, the Scopus like the citations, that is an H in it. It's not mine, unfortunately. Google Scholar. Now, this is typical, this is a search on our Deputy Vice Chancellor research, by the way, that has a bit more publications than me. So, I'll put in his name and surname, and he has a Google Scholar profile. So what you find, typically that's the list, and right at the top, there's a profile, because he created his own profile. And when you click on that, this is what it presents you with. The whole publications, who your authors are, their citations, these are all his publications. And one of the advantages in this, if you think about it, is that if somebody finds, let's say from the other side of the world, somebody finds, even, probably from just a few miles down the road, finds one of your papers and finds really interesting. With that, they may say, oh, I wonder what other things Joy has published, because she seems to be really in my area. They're not going to be put in a whole search, especially with some names, they're just not going to be able to distill your papers. But what they do, they go there, and they see who you collaborate with, who are your papers, and everything. So it's a way of promoting yourself. And the other thing, it doesn't matter where you work. Tomorrow you can go and work, University of Sydney. That's still yours. And so it brings together, and then the people that can read them, you keep building on your identity, your global identity as a researcher. And now ORCID, I'm sure some people have come across ORCID. ORCID is this attempt, because we have all these identifiers, it's like having PIN numbers, it's just, can't follow it all. ORCID is something that started in America. There's been a lot, I think that came up not long ago, and there's a big push. In fact, HESA now, you can report your ORCID ID in your HESA staff record and your student record if you're a PhD student. So what ORCID does, it tries to bring everything together, and it links all your identifiers. So, yeah, this is mine. And so, in fact, Research Council might be adopting it, and now there are some funders that want the ORCID ID. It's a global thing. It's very easy. It's for free. You go and get it. And what it does, if you look at these two screenshots, you can see them down there. If you go into the Research ID, which is the Web of Science, says, yeah, link it to my ORCID account. So this, and they're trying to put in, patents, grants, so it's trying to get everything together. And I know the EU is looking into using ORCID extensively. So this is about, having your your researcher profile. And the last thing is open data. Nobody knows how to do this, but anyway, we thought that we have to do it. It goes back to the same thing as open access. Research data created for public funded research should be accessible and open. Okay, data is slightly more complex because you might collect a lot of data and you don't want to put it all there. So there are all sorts of other things that you can do with it. So EPSSC and other research council, front the old data, if you have funded research, all kinds, great by funding should be made accessible and usable. Usable means as well that you have some metadata that explains exactly what's in the data set. It's not just you've dumped an Excel spreadsheet, And you have to keep it, and in fact, with open data, if you get a request, if you don't get a request for, I think, 8 years, then you can get rid of it. But if you get a request at year 7.5, then you have to keep it for another 8 years. So it's difficult. And there are some journals, more and more, that expect you to submit the data sets with your papers. And I know, there are a lot of stories going around. We see them more and more of fabricated, results of experiments and things like that. And this is all to make it clear and transparent. And this is coming, and it's very difficult. And we will, jump around trying to know how to do it. But as always, there's a tool called Figshare, which is free, that you can have as an institute. You have a license, so it's a bit small. I just put it on as where you can store your data sets, keep them private, and in fact you can collaborate with others, so you can access the same data sets. And then when you're ready to release them, you release them to the public. Now we have bought a license to Figshare as an institution, and the thing it does is that once you start working on a particular data set, it creates a DOI. In fact, you as an institution can provide, it's yours. You create the DOI. And therefore, then what you do in your publications, you put the DOI where they can find the data. There are other open data, of course, in the virus genetic sequencing of these things, they're already there. There are some disciplines that already use these type of, these data repository. But of course, it's going to be coming. And in fact, if you want some brownie points in the next rep, start talking about open data in the environment statement. So that will give you some brownie points. But it is difficult. Nobody really knows how to do it. The University of Edinburgh, they have the DCC, the Data Curation Centre, which is very advanced on these things. The only thing, they give you some guidelines, because it's really difficult for people to know how to do this. And of course, they said, but I want to use my own data, well, put it out, so it is complex. So, to conclude, aftermath imperatives. Research should be discoverable. I call them imperatives. You don't have to follow everything I say. All disciplines are moving towards open access. Journals, high quality journals are open access. High quality measures are engaged with open access agenda. Repositories are growing, and our metrics are developing. And they're going to be used more and more. Process should be discoverable, and so academics should be able to take their profile with them. This is your profile, and the independent individual research for the academic can be enhanced by being online. And then reviews are accessible. It is in general good research practice, making the underlying data available. And frankly, it's a two-way street. You can always then look at somebody else's data. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
I should think most of us are on research. Is it research again?
Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't mention that. I just wanted
No, sorry, because I was just, yes, yeah. That's been growing as well. And that's another way, it's absolutely fine. I mean, I just put on a couple of examples.
I mean, I suppose I get the impression that there are lots of PhD students in China, and they, might happen to want to have quick access to an article I've written. I suppose I don't really feel to have them citing me as of any great merit to me, or advantage to me, and I don't see how we can distinguish between people who you feel were adding to the weight of your knowledge by citing you, and people who are just citing you and don't carry any weight. Do you understand my
Yeah. Yes, but that's true. But it's impossible to know before people build on your research. I think in general, research, you keep building on somebody else's work. So they might build on it, or they might just go because they have to do it when they write up their PhD. But it's, well, when do you know? You know, I don't see any disadvantage of not having research in open access or discoverable.
Well,
There
there
can
might
only
be any disadvantage, but that's different from saying it's worthwhile me paying a great deal of attention to it because it's advantageous. I consider it to be neither here nor there.
Yeah, I mean, let's say that yeah, it's a position, but there's some. You can, as I say, you can not pay attention at all to your citation and everything, but I don't know, if I see that one of my papers is cited, I sometimes go, well, not that I've published much at all, but I sometimes go back and see who cited it, and if they said something interesting I can build on. I mean, I know we all don't have much time. That's true, but that's sometimes why those sort of virtual research networks, things like that, are helpful, because there's somebody else that maybe is doing some other things. But the advantage of having your research discoverable is because people can read it. And if you think you made a contribution, you know, it's important that you think that you're disseminating as much as you can.
It was, yeah. So thinking about the future, you just uttered the well-worn cliche, we don't have much time. Does anyone disagree with that? Actually, I don't have much to do.
All the time in the world.
I don't know why keeps timing out. I think everybody's pretty busy. So thinking about that, and also thinking about the proliferation of metrics at various different times. So do you have any thoughts? I mean, I'm almost asking kind of what are you doing? Presumably you are following some kind of strategy yourself, which you therefore regard as a reasonably good strategy for dealing with the proliferation of new systems and new metrics. Sue mentioned the research game.
Yeah.
You know,
There's academia.
You could spend all your
I
time
know.
signing up to these different things, couldn't you? And then you could spend all your time promoting your research through the various different social media. So you never actually need to do any research, right? Because you could spend all week signing up to new and then promoting yourself and then doing all of the clever stuff to promote your research. So clearly one cannot do that. Equally clearly, eventually one assumes that some of these metrics and some of these systems will come to predominate. So what does the pragmatic researcher do now, given that you can't do everything, but clearly this is going to become important, and so you have to follow some kind of strategy, don't you? Have you any thoughts on how the pragmatic researcher approaches this?
Well, I personally don't publish enough even to start having a strategy for myself, but in general, art metrics seems to be something to take up, but it's like going back to the Betamax and which one. And these metrics are going to come out, tweets. I don't know. Is it worth looking at them? Is it worth? I think in general, it's just find something you're comfortable with, and just go with it. I don't think you have to go and use social media all the time. If you're comfortable in doing it, you do it anyway. In certain type of areas, or disciplines even, or community, they do this all the time anyway, because that's the way they operate. So I would just pick on something you're comfortable with. The metric thing, I just hope we're not, I mean, from my point of view, peer review is always the way that research should be assessed. It has its faults, not always works, but peer review has to be the way. And all the metrics gives you some information about it, but I would never say use the number of blogs or tweets to assess the quality of a piece of work. Absolutely not. So ResearchGate, that is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. Absolutely fine to use that. Our metrics, you might just use it occasionally if you want to see something particular because it's for free. You don't need to have the whole thing about your own research. If you think, well, this might have been of interest to somebody, you just look at it yourself. So it's a bit horses for courses, but open access, I think, is really important. And I think it becomes more of a, not saying a duty, but part of, you know,
It's just routine, I think it
Yeah.
should be absolutely routine.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there's no controversy there as far as I can see.
Yeah.
It's just the way
Yeah,
you have
of
to
course, the publishers are playing it,
Yeah.
but it's expensive. It's very expensive. You want to put, you know, an article in some journals, it's over £4,000 per article. They are very expensive. But there are a lot of free big repositories that you might, you know, like SSR, and you can just put your stuff there. So there are other ways.
So when you say,
Jane,
Um,
you had a question?
Well, it's just a point really. I was quite interested to note that our university has started something called The Conversation,
Yes.
which I guess everybody got an email about this morning. So, unlike many things which I don't like, I don't think that was a bad way actually of writing 800 words as a commentary either on your research or anything really. And then the second thing was that I've never come across this before, but I was at an editorial meeting of a Sage journal that I edit, and they've come up with this idea of vodcasts. Now, perhaps everyone in the room knows what a vodcast is,
No.
except for me.
A podcast.
Yeah.
I was thinking about vodka. Sorry.
Shaken and not stirred. No, what it was is it was, you know, obviously they want to get out information about their articles, but they were sort of encouraging people to do a short kind of video, either introducing their article or a virtual special edition where you look back in the journal and maybe you take 4 or 5 articles that are linked and do a commentary. Apparently they help you do that. So with something like Sage, which publishes a lot of social science, business school journals, you know, that
But that's
That would be
interesting.
something
There was, I
to-
went to some workshop, no it wasn't, it was a talk in, quite a few months ago. There was a professor of chemistry from Imperial that's very, very pro open access, accessible, more accessible research. And in fact, they started a journal or website, I can't remember exactly what it was, but they translated in a way the abstract from, you know, the very disciplinary, very, very techy around the discipline to a way that more people could understand. And he said the biggest problem he has, he does a lot of multidisciplinary research. It is not so that the public understands it, but the other academics that are maybe not exactly, you know, in that area of that particular discipline to understand it, so that you can start looking at interdisciplinary research. Because it's not just a question that the public doesn't understand from the abstract, but other academics don't either, even within the same discipline, because it becomes so, you know, jargon. And so there is something which is just not, oh, so, you know, so the public can. And look, when you look at those things and you look at the tweets and downloads, they're all in the social sciences. If you're a mathematician, you have very, very few chances of the public start downloading 10,000 times your article. Okay, but that's fine. You know, it's not. It doesn't mean that you know, it doesn't mean much. But if you write your abstract in a way that people can access it, you might find engineers that are very interested in your paper. So it's not just a question of, you know, making research accessible is not just because there's a public or there is, you know, a minister somewhere or a think tank or whatever think tank where we can read them, but it is to read, because it is now about multidisciplinary research. You know, big grants, big funding, big things are all around multidisciplinary research. So it's even between academics in slightly different, or even in the same discipline, but slightly different areas somewhere. So we're trying to, yeah.
yes, you just mentioned a cost of £4,000 for a publication. What does that mean? How does that work? I mean, why does it cost anything?
No, that is if you want to put in open access.
Yeah, but again, why does my question is why? How?
Because
By who?
that's what the
Who do you pay?
publisher.
Who's
The
paying?
publisher. The publisher.
You have to pay them. So are you buying it back off the publisher? Are you buying back the copyright?
You're buying the right of having your research available to everybody.
Okay, so
if-
you're sort of buying back access to your research?
Yeah,
effectively.
well, yeah, for everybody else, because
After you
otherwise.
pay them to publish it?
Oh, well, after you pay, you normally pay the subscription,
Yeah.
but so what happens is, if you don't pay the open access, it means that the people that will read the research are only the ones that subscribe to the journal you're published in. So if I publish in Rosa Scoble's journal,
Yeah.
only people that, not many people will buy it, I know, only people that subscribe to Rosa Scoble's journal will read your research if you publish in my journal.
It's only gold.
If it's in gold, and it's going to be out there
You
in,
don't have to pay anything for free.
no.
So just about everything we publish we will make available through green open access.
Yeah.
Gold open access is not something that this university is going to use a great deal, because it's not very rich.
No,
But also, it's included, if you do get, at the moment anyway, if you get one of these research council grants that
it's
require it,
included.
you can put it in
Yeah.
for your costs.
Yes, yeah, and that's all you have. In fact, the research council say gold.
Yes.
So the research council pay for it. But if you want to go green, effectively what you're doing is you're not paying them for the data, you're publishing it anyway.
Yeah, you're publishing, as Rosa explained, final author copy, you can archive, that's green open access, and you can do that usually after some embargo period.
Yeah.
And
Which varies.
that's all, and that's fine, that's absolutely fine. That's-
Even if it's effectively identical to one of the
Yeah, it is very largely identical, yes.
Yeah.
It's just not typeset,
Yeah.
usually.
The same one, all right, okay.
But as I say, if you only see the research council money, yeah.
And we have an open access thing at the university.
Yes.
Yeah, but we-
do.
We go with
Yeah,
access,
yeah,
yeah.
I'm sure we're gonna win, but-
Yeah.
We've got an information system where it all goes into
The
and then
research,
it'll come and
yeah.
it's
Okay.
available.
Yeah.
When you said, one of the things that I found particularly interesting was the policy documents, because of course we're all
Yeah.
wanting our research to have impact, needing in fact our research to have impact, and you can't find out about it.
Exactly, yeah.
So that struck me as very interesting, because obviously policy is,
Yeah, it's impact.
It's impact.
Yeah, yeah.
so potentially impact. So are you having a policy at Brunel of using that database, get the information, then you go back to the academic and say, yeah.
Yeah.
Are we doing the same thing? Do you know?
I'm doing as much as I can with one person.
Yeah, so you're the right person to ask, so I'll ask you.
Yes.
So do we have that kind of,
We're not using our metrics at the moment. It's something we've considered. I think maybe ask you about it.
Yeah.
But yes.
that just struck me as a really,
Yeah.
potentially that was a really useful thing, to, if someone's looking at it at the university level, and they can just get back to people.
I'd encourage everyone to look at your own research as well.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry for the slightly facetious response, but
No.
I am the sole impact person for the university.
But all I'm saying is if it's one metric and it comes up with a number, and it wasn't a great number for yours, was it? It
No.
was a very high
No,
number.
the other thing you have to remember are metrics. That's not started long ago. So, I think it's 2012.
Yeah. And
So if you had a paper that came out earlier than that,
Yeah.
it wouldn't.
But all I'm saying is there's not a great many, so one person in the centre, it strikes me at the moment anyway, is probably,
yeah, but you can
compared to all of us spending our individual time, each of us looking on the off chance that we might get one reference in a blue moon, that's all.
Yeah, but then you still would have to work to trace back to each individual reference. No, I'm not.
You could give the person that work to do.
Yeah.
No, the policy is into it, as are the news are from newspapers. Now, you would know if, it's your marketing department has managed to get, as they always try, to get academics that are capable to speak to that newspaper anyway, to ridicule my research, so that sort of thing. But if the marketing department manages, in the newspaper, but there's sometimes that we didn't know in the news. It's interesting, especially if it's in newspapers that are not, I've done some research over it. I've been, the Corriere della Sera, which is newspaper, not
Rosa?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Hi, Rosa. You mentioned this system, ORCID.
Yeah.
And you said that system might be used by research councils in the future.
It might, yeah.
Yeah. Is that one of the systems where you need to register, create your own profile, etc., or does it do the aggregate from other systems?
Yes, so typically you go on ORCID. By the way, you can have one at institutional level, so that's an institutional level, so that there's somebody that gives out all the ORCID IDs. But some people already have their ORCID ID. And so what you do, you register, and then if you have a Web of Science profile and a Google Scholar and and Scoble,
Okay.
then you link them.
Merges, okay.
Then you link them. So they just suck them in. But that's what they're trying to do, is to have them on patents. So the problem, especially if they were saying that probably in South Korea there are 3 surnames.
Yeah.
Because China's got very few as well.
Yeah. So and yeah, yeah. So it's really difficult. But that's why as well I say that the researcher profile is really it's something that's easy. We're trying to push everybody around to have a Google Scholar profile. It's really easy. You get on it, they search a publication and say, yes, these are all mine, and they put them in a nice little profile. And that is the thing that if somebody finds, a paper with 6 co-authors and you're one of them, then, and if you have your profile, they can say, oh, otherwise they might, if they want to follow on and see what other research is done in that area, if they're interested, that's an easy way to, and you might find people that maybe want to collaborate with you because you are in the same space.
Are Google, do you think, really wanting to invest in Google Scholar? I found it very odd. I have to.
It's very clunky. I mean, it's the most basic stuff.
Yes, yeah, my impression, it hasn't. I know it used to be the only thing, didn't it? And so,
Yeah.
But now it doesn't seem any different.
No.
When you want to use it, I don't know if it's just me, but I can't seem to get it to go higher up the thing. So I have to go. I want more. I then want more. I then want even more, and I get down to Google Scholar.
Yeah.
And we seem to have disconnected our library search from Google Scholar.
Oh, right.
That's a recent update that we've had on our library systems.
I
An
can't-
improvement. I think that's right.
I can't find anything on library search, so I always go back to Google Scholar.
Yes, so I think many was doing that. But I'm just wondering, I was getting a feeling Google are not that interested at the moment in investing in it.
I don't think so. That's not where they make their money, is it?
There's a
Academic community. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Can I just hijack this? If people are updating, if you've got a profile on ResearchGate, I strongly encourage you to also update your profile on RIS, even if it's just copying and pasting. RIS is our internal information
Yeah.
system. RIS is often the first thing that comes up in the news research for academics. I've tested this with everyone I've spoken to over the last few months, and it's always within the top 3. We've had some conversations with policymakers as part of the pilot project we're doing, and they say, if we can't find you on Google, you don't exist, we won't come to you for advice. So even if it's just a few sentences about what your area of research is, then please update it. And if you don't know how to, then email me or email Ellie, and I think it's just a case of plugging into the RIS, which is on the single site.
In a way, all this thing is, these are different ways, techniques, and people are not interested. Academics can decide in a way to freedom of decide if you want to be on these things or not. But these are just some ideas of how to make it easier for people to find your research and find you.
If you want to be found.
If you want to be found, absolutely. We had some academics when with our we have a subjective elements as a publication database that then links to our web pages. So it sucks in the publications from our database. We had academics that refused to put their publication on a publication database and said, I don't want to see any on my profile. But part of the fact that the BBC research said that was not an option, because they are paid by the university, so there's a limit. And the other thing said, but it's publicly available. This information, your publications are out there. So there can be tensions, and I don't think that we should give the freedom of the academic, to find their own space and not dictate everybody needs a Google Scholar and that. But it is helpful if you want to use these. And by 6 months' time, they're going to be another. I don't know how many. But they'll all be based around roughly the same stuff. Yeah. Let's hope that Joe Johnson doesn't want the right to go metrics. It's coming round again. After spending a year and a half doing this huge amount of work, which is a really, really good report. We're back again.
No, I think honestly, it's just, so when you were talking about metrics, one of them is download.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, yeah, I'll set up a download mill.
Okay.
I'll resign. I'll just set up a small business, which is
Yeah.
in the download mill business.
Yeah.
And you subscribe to my service, and I make sure that you get several hundred downloads for all your papers.
No, in fact-
Because obviously you can't do it from your own office.
So you might find out
This
this
is
thing.
clearly going to work that out, but the gaming of these things is
Oh,
so
it's colossal.
straightforward.
It's colossal. It's like self-citation. It's, you know, it's,
Obviously entrepreneurs would do that.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't you do that?
no, I think it's the idea of, you know,
Twitter citations, and we can.
Yeah, I could do the whole thing. We could go into business.
well, that's the problem with police, so also
And this the end of the question?
Child labour as well.
Thank you.
otherwise we're descending into.
Poor Rosa must be wondering, am I put here in the
No, well, I could go on talking about these things forever.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Well, thank you very much.